But tonight's going to be let's just talk about what a but God series is, or what a but God moment is. And I want to explore some real life experiences of men and women from the Bible that had a but God encounter. And I want to look at some different situations where saints of God kind of encountered God over the years. So in this study, what I want to look at is, what is a but God moment? All right. Now, we all may have our own version of what this is, and if that is, that's good. We're going to talk about this tonight from the way I look at it. We could call this the what, when, why, and who of God experiences, of but God experiences. So, what is a but God experience? All right. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, get into this intro, and then next week we'll start diving into some actual saints of God that went through some of these things, but we'll touch on that a little bit tonight. We'll look at what it is, when do they occur? Do they ever occur when we want them to? Do they ever occur when we'd like them to? Typically, no. So we'll talk about that some. Why in our day is it important for us to even look at this? Hopefully, and even from my Wednesday night Bible study that we were having, what I want you to do is to be able to walk away and how can we practically apply what we hear tonight to our lives. If you're only coming in to listen to JC or listen to me and you get a good fuzzy feeling and then you walk away and you don't actually take anything with you, then we've done something wrong. We want you to take this word. How is this going to help my life? How is this going to affect my life? How is this going to help me be closer to Christ? And that's what we're after tonight with this study. When do they occur? Why in our day is it important? And we might as well add who in the Bible experienced some but God moments. So there's something I like to call the law of first mention. And I love to go, when you're looking in the Bible, look at the law of first mention when you're studying something. And so tonight we're going to actually look at the first mention of a but God in here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we'll zero in probably more on some of the other people as we go on. But what does a but God experience mean? To answer this, it's probably best to look at some people in the Bible who've experienced but God moments. So from some of those, you don't have to turn there. I'm going to jump through some of these real quick, and then we'll get into the one tonight. But who experienced some but God moments? Abraham and Sarah. In Genesis 21-3, it says, "Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of Negev, and there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, 'She is my sister.' Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, 'You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken, she is married.'" Joseph, Acts 7:9-10 says, "Because of the patriarchs were jealous of Joseph, they sold him as a slave into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him from all his troubles." David, 1 Samuel 23:14, "David stayed in the desert strongholds and in the hills and the deserts of Ziph. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands." Even Jesus, Acts 3:14-15 says, "You discovered the holy and righteous one, or you disowned the holy and righteous one, and asked that a murderer be released. You killed the author of life, but God raised him from the dead. We are witnesses of this." Paul and Epaphroditus, it says in Philippians 2:25-27, "But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, fellow worker, and fellow soldier. Indeed, he was ill and almost died, but God had mercy on him, and not only him, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow." And then this was the one that really stood out to me: all believers, each and every one of you, if you truly are saved tonight, you've had a but God moment, whether you know it or not. In Romans 5:6-8, it says, "For while we were still helpless, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for a good man someone would dare even to die. But God demonstrates his own love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." So we've all had a but God moment. So let's talk a little bit about when they occur. Right now, Hope Church is in a moment of kind of a storm. We're in a turmoil about where we're going to be. Now, we know God's got a plan. We're going to trust God, and God's going to bring us through this on the other side, and we're going to look back and go, why did we even worry about it? Because it's going to be better than what we think it could be. But while you're going through these storms at times, it seems like they can be challenging. And sometimes we miss what God is trying to teach you. So we see from the brief examples above that most but God moments happen during times of trouble, right? Have any of you ever experienced kind of a moment of trouble, but then all of a sudden, but God shows up and he does something miraculous or he does something great in your life? We've all had them. There are times when the Lord needs to step in. When Abraham, through fear, put his own wife, Sarah, in jeopardy or in harm's way, God stepped in and protected her, even when Abraham didn't or should have. After Joseph was rejected and sold as a slave by his own brothers, look at the life that Joseph had. Look at all the things that happened to him. But God showed up in every circumstance, in everything. And then at the end of it, you look at where Joseph was. That was only a but God. These times come when we normally run out of other options. Now, I don't know if you guys are anything like me. I'm sure it's just me. Maybe JC, but just me. When things go wrong in my life, I figure it out. I'm the one who has to solve the problem. I'm the one that goes through all the struggles and the trials, and I'm figuring out everything that I can do to make it right. And a lot of times, now this is just me, a lot of times I'm guilty of going to God last instead of going to God first when I'm in the middle of my problems or when I'm in the middle of the storm. When we should, and hopefully we will, learn that through these struggles, first person we should go to is God, because God is the one that's going to help us through this anyway. So we miss that sometimes. We look at the Lord himself. He was killed and placed in a grave, but God raised him from the dead. But God, even Jesus himself needed a but God moment. In all of life's challenges, we need to remember that. We talked about highlighting a little phrase and whether it sticks or it doesn't stick. Christians aren't kept from the storms, we're kept through the storms. Now, I hope you can remember that, because a lot of times we look at the world outside and we look at people who are non-Christians. We look at people and we go, why are they having it so easy? Why is it going so well for them? Why am I going through this when they are not? But we have to understand that we're going through a storm for a reason, and that while we're going through that storm, Christ himself is keeping us. He's not going to let us go. He's not going to bring any harm to us that is not for our benefit. I'll say it that way. So stop and think about it. Have you ever experienced some but God moments in your life? When did they occur? Was it when the sun was shining and the birds were chirping and everything was going right? No, it's when things were going wrong. When the doctor gave you the news you didn't want to hear. When that relationship fell apart that you thought was going to last forever. It was when work called and said, we got to let you go. Those are the times when we need a but God moment, right? Some of you may be going through those right now. Some of you may be going through trials. We as Hope Church we're going through a trial. So we may be going through those things right now. What we have to understand is, hopefully, if you've gone through those and you've come out on the other side, did you learn anything from it? Do you have a memory of it? Do you have something that stands out in your mind that helped you through that time? The fact that God kept us through that time. So why in our day is it important to look on these things and to remember a but God moment? Before looking at the first mention of but God in the Bible, I kind of want to talk about why. Anybody turn on the news lately? I mean, that's reason enough that we need a but God moment, right? I mean, look at the state of the world that we live in right now. We're coming off the tail end of COVID, and I know that's been 2 or 3 years ago, but depression, anxiety, suicide rates are through the roof right now as a result of what we went through. Lawlessness. I mean, you can't turn on the TV now without seeing some violent crime. We live in times where the words unprecedented are used more now than in any other time in history. Every single day you'll hear somebody say, we've got something unprecedented took place. We just went through a flood here in our hometown yesterday. I mean, unprecedented. What was it, 1929 was the last time we had a rainfall anywhere close to this? I mean, it was crazy. So even things like that, we're living in many trying times. Through COVID, Most churches were forced to shut down. Some churches never restarted. We were fortunate enough to travel a few years ago, went over to Europe, and Europe is an indicator of what we see here in the United States a lot. What happens there typically trickles down here. We were in Scotland, and 98% of the country now is atheist or non-Christian, non-denominational, or no Christian at all. All the churches were closed. You go driving down the road and you'd see this huge cathedral that used to be a church, and it was a nightclub. Or you'd see one that was a climbing wall inside of it now. The country of Scotland and even Ireland now, the numbers have dwindled so much on people who actually claim to be Christians. If you look at the math even here in the States right now, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, the number was like 74% claimed to be Christian. Today, it's less than 50%. The numbers have dwindled greatly. So we are in trying times. Whether it's just things like that are going on, people are looking at this and seeing end times. They're seeing things that where their hearts are getting kind of, you look in Luke, it says, in the last days, people's hearts will fail them for fear of what they see coming upon the earth. Now, we're not there yet. We're not in those times, but we do see the birth pains, don't we? These are groanings that we're going through, and we see all of these things. And know for sure that there is a direct correlation between fear and what you're focused on. Is that true? If something comes up in your life, whether you faced a job, whether you face something sick, or a doctor's where he's told you something's going on, fear directs the way we think a lot of times, right? And it doesn't point us to God most of the time. Should, but a lot of times it points us in a different direction and we try to handle things differently. We need to remember the times when God's light shined in our lives. That's one of the reasons we try to remember this. Why? Is because we want to remember those times God brought us through and apply those to our lives as we go through new struggles now. Romans 15:13 says, now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Hebrews 6:19 says this, we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain. When we go through these things, why we go through them a lot of times, we talk about Jonah just this past Sunday. Jonah turned away from God. He walked the other direction, intentionally running from God. He went through a storm, didn't he? And it was a storm that God caused. God blew the winds down on Jonah to get him to correct his path. And so we have to understand that as we go through these storms, there are things we can learn. And hopefully as we learn them, that we can apply those for future storms that come up. We can help others around us. We can be an anchor to other people around us. So first mention of but God. All right, it's in Genesis. Anybody have any clue who it might be? Good. No, first time it's mentioned is Noah. Now you can't ask for a more perfect storm analogy. We're talking about the entire earth covered in water. All mankind, all animals, everything, start to finish, wiped out. So the first mention is Noah and the crazy days of the flood. Genesis 7:17 through 8:1. We're going to read that now. It says, then the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the waters increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. The water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. Thus he blotted out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky. And they were blotted out from the earth. And only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. The waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. I can't even imagine what that would have been like for Noah on the boat. We were recently, just last week, we were down at the beach, and I'm looking out and I see nothing but water as far as the eye can see from dry land. Now, I'm sitting on dry land looking at this, and there's a storm out there. Can you imagine being the only thing on the earth at that time, a boat? nothing else. Everything else is covered by water. I get a kick because we don't ever hear about it and we don't see it in the Word, but God never told Noah what he was going to do on the other side. He just told him to build the ark, didn't he? Noah had no clue as to what was coming on the backside of this. God just told him to build it and to get in it, and he would seal it up. And that's what he did. But he never told him what God's plan was on the other side, did he? He didn't tell him how long the storm would last. He didn't tell him what he would do afterwards. We go through these storms a lot of times and we have no clue what's on the other side. But we know God keeps us through these storms. God brings us righteous through, but can you imagine what it would have been like on there? A storm above, chaos and floods below, and there you are getting rocked around by the wind and the waves. Imagine looking out and every piece of land is covered. I just can't imagine that would have been a very good feeling on that boat at that time. Can't imagine being with all those animals. My wife would have been in heaven. I would not, okay? It was just a little different between us. There's not an animal in this world that my wife doesn't love and wouldn't take home with her if she could. Me, on the other hand, there are some evil animals, I'm just going to tell you, all right? And they are in the cat family. I'm not going to say cats, but, I'm just saying. But no, on this boat with all the animals, Noah had no hope, really. You think about it. He had nothing to look at. He was completely in God's hands. Now, I'm going to take just a minute and I want to tell you my God story, my but God story. You guys see me walking around here. For those of you who've been coming around, seeing me around, you see me limp, all right? And I have a permanent limp now from an accident where my wife and I were involved in a motorcycle accident back in 2013. We were going to meet some friends. I was an avid motorcycle rider. I've been all across the country through Canada. I used to love to ride. And we were going to meet some friends for just a day trip. It was cold. I'd leathered up, so I looked like a typical biker. I had the leather chaps and the jacket and the gloves. And that morning it was cold, so I put on a full face helmet, which was unusual for me. But we left, and about 45 minutes into the ride, we stopped to get gas. We were about 15 minutes away from where we were going to meet them. And so normally, I was filling up the bike, and my wife told me, she said, I don't have a good feeling about today. Now, normally, anybody ever said that when we were on a ride, it didn't matter where we were. Everybody went home, put the bikes up. It was that simple. Just didn't take a chance. For some reason that day, I was like, we're only 15 minutes away. Maybe we'll get there and they won't want to do something. So I said, let's go. Bad decision, but we went. About a mile up from the gas station, there's an intersection. Two roads come in, north and southbound traffic, has right of way. It's a dangerous intersection. They tell you to slow down. So we slowed down. As we're pulling into the intersection, I see this SUV come up from this side, and I see her hit her brake lights. So I turn, truck coming up over here, he's stopping, little girl's jogging back here, nice early morning jog. I could see some cars coming from the north. But in that split second, I turn, Stacy grabs me on the shoulder, and I hear, oh God. And when I turn back around, I'm looking down the hood of an SUV now. This girl didn't see us. She's got her phone in her hand. I don't know how she did it. She had her foot up on the dash. I mean, I couldn't do that if I tried, even when I was healthy, but she's got her foot on the dash, hand on the steering wheel, phone right here where I could see it, and she's barreling through the intersection. So she hits us broadside. Somehow, I came off the bike, got trapped under the SUV. Stacy stayed on the bike and ended up in a ditch about 20 yards away. Girl stops. I'm laying under there. I can feel the heat from the engine and see the radiator, and I'm checking everything out while I'm under there. But then she backs off of me and whoop, daylight again. So first reaction is my wife okay? I kept calling out, is my wife okay? I wanted to get up. But in this time, there's two guys standing over me, and they're like, no, don't move, don't move. And they're doing things, and this girl's running around, she's crying, and I'm like, calm down, everything's okay. If they'll just let me sit up, I'll be fine. And she's like, she's freaking out. There's two people over with my wife in the ditch, and then there's this one guy going back and forth, back and forth. So finally, the ambulance gets there. They load us both into the same ambulance, and we go off to the hospital together. We're cutting up in the ambulance. I made even a comment. They were cutting our clothes off and everything as we're going. I'm like, man, I'm glad I wore clean underwear today. This is one of those deals where Mom always talked about, And so we're cutting up. We get to the hospital, And I guess the drugs kicked in because as soon as those doors open, I'm gone. I don't remember anything for several weeks after that. Spent a few weeks in intensive care, a few weeks in the hospital, several weeks in Siskin, went home in a wheelchair, back to the hospital multiple times. So what happened, the gory details, wife had compound fracture of her bone. There's a dog running around Uwal right now with about that much of her bone still because it was gone. So, but she had a compound fracture and a broke wrist. I had 27 broke bones. Shoulder, all my ribs on this side, my hip, my leg, knee, tibia, fibia, my ankle was crushed. The doctor, he even told me later, he said it was a little bit of hubris. He said, I wanted to save it just because I thought I could instead of amputating the leg. So he did. And I'm thankful to this day for that. But I had a punctured lung and a lacerated spleen. So all of this, and I looked like a metal man afterwards where they had all this metal on me. But my but God moment was this. The truck that pulled up, he was an orthopedic surgeon. The first car coming from the north, family practitioner. The car behind him was another doctor. The little girl that was jogging, an ER nurse at Erlanger Hospital. And then the next car on the scene within a minute was a Baptist preacher. So I had two guys keeping me from bleeding out on the scene, or I would have died there that day. I had two people working on my wife and a Baptist preacher running back and forth praying for both of us. But God showed up. Now, one day, I'm going to get to God and say, couldn't you just made her stop? Wouldn't that have been easier? Just hit the brake? I didn't understand at the time. I do now. I've seen the results of this later on, but I wasn't living my life like I should have. And unfortunately, there are times in our lives when we have to go through storms to teach us a lesson. Or, as I put it, be taken to the woodshed. Now, some of you are old enough to know what I'm saying when we talk about going to the woodshed, because I went to the woodshed more than once when I was a kid. I think we need some more of that today. I'm sorry, that's my one moment of preaching from the pulpit. But anyway, so a little wee detour on the storms of life there. So let's go back to the first but God mentioned in the Bible. We see it occurred in the life of Noah during the biggest storm in his life, or in the biggest storm the world had ever seen. There was a flood, devastation, but God remembered Noah. Looking at some of the scripture surrounding the storms in the Bible, we can grasp some of the reasons for the outcomes from the storms that God allows in our lives. I can actually look back now and still not thrilled about it. Not going to tell you. Chronic pain, nerve damage, suffer a lot from it. But one day I was at work. Guy came in doing some work and engineering. I was talking with him. Got 5 o'clock, everybody leaves the office. Now this dude's a big dude. I mean, he's 6'4", muscles just huge. And he's sitting over there and we get talking. He said, I got to ask, did you hurt your knee? Why are you limping? I said, you messed up. I said, I promised God if anybody ever asked me, I was going to tell the story. So I told him the story. I get done, I look over and this dude is just swallowing, tears rolling out of his eyes. And he said, I want to know your God. We got down at my desk and he gave his life to Christ that day. If that one soul was all it was for, it was worth it. It's hard to say that at times. Trust me, there are nights when I'm up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the night where I can't sleep from the pain. But if it was just that one soul, it was worth it. The storms you're going through right now, trust me, they're worth it. We don't always understand why. We don't always see the other side. But God has a plan. God has a purpose. Job 37, 9 through 13 says, out of the south comes the storm, and out of the north the cold. From the breath of God, ice is made, and the expanse of the water is frozen. Also with moisture, he loads the thick cloud. He disperses the cloud of his lightning. It changes direction, turning around by his guidance, that it may do whatever he commands it on the face of the inhabited earth, whether for correction or for his word or for his loving kindness, he causes it to happen. Now, I know people will say, only good and perfect gifts come from God. The accident, I'm not sure I call it a gift, but I learned a lot from it. Where I'm at today and the fact that I'm still here today is a gift, and that's a gift from God. So we have to look at these things, and we have to understand that God causes sometimes, or controls, not causes, but he controls them, and he uses the storms to our benefits. You guys may be going through storms right now. You may not see the other side, all right? You may not know what's coming, but trust me, God has a plan. Just be patient with him. Let him work through it, because you'll be amazed at what he'll do on the other side. God guides the storms, as Elihu said here to Job. This is both natural and spiritual storms. He has purposes for them, and they follow his command. The natural storms were perfect illustrations for the storm Job was facing in his day. Some are for correction and some are for loving kindness. For his own, there are blessings in the storm. Job 46 says this, "Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm and said," how many times have you been going through a storm, you didn't understand it, but you heard God? You ever been there? I was months removed, can't even remember where it was. I was still in a wheelchair, couldn't go to work. I was out on the front porch. It was pouring down rain. I was sitting on my front porch in the wheelchair. Now, all this time that I'd gone through this, I still hadn't figured it out yet. I was still kind of maybe grumbling a little bit, maybe not thrilled about what is going on. I had finally realized I wasn't going to be like I was before, wasn't going to be able to do all the things that I used to do. And I was sitting on that front porch, and a song came on the radio. And that song, "Even If" by Mercy Me, I don't know if you guys have ever heard it, but I tell you, that song touched me. And God showed me that no matter where I'm at in this life, he gave me salvation. He gave me a promise of heaven, and he said he would keep. So even though maybe things weren't going like I thought they were, what I had gained from serving God was eternal life. It's well worth it. It took me to finally get to that point before I actually started seeing a change in my life. But I can look back and I can tell you the exact moment. And it was funny, it was a song on the radio. That's what did it for me. Showed me God's hand in what was going on. So the storms speak to us, or God can speak to us through the storms. Isaiah 54:11-12 says, "O afflicted one, storm-tossed and not comforted, behold, I will set your stones in antimony, and your foundations I will lay in sapphires. Moreover, I will make your battlements of rubies and your gates of crystal and your entire wall of precious stones." Storms can solidify, strengthen, and even make them grand, the foundations that we live on. But we have to see them for what they are. We can grumble about them, or we can see them for what they are. A solid foundation is established through storms. I saw an article here a while back, and it was talking about a tree. This tree in this town. This town didn't have any severe weather. They had rain every once in a while, but it didn't have a lot of rain. This tree had grown in the middle of their town, and man, they loved this tree. Kind of became the center of their town. They had a bad storm one year. First time they'd ever really seen a storm in probably 100 years. Tree had never gone through any struggles in its life. It had never had any strong winds. It had never seen any storms. First storm that came along, it fell over. How many Christians do you know are like that? They go through life just kind of drifting along because they don't get into the Word. They don't get closer to God. They don't challenge themselves. And then the first storm that comes along, you'll see them off in a ditch. Been there, done that. Got the scars to prove. But we have to be careful about that. We have to be able to build that root foundation, and the storms help us do that. When the storms comes, it makes us stronger as Christians. Now, I hate to say that. I wish I could tell you becoming a Christian and everything's smooth sailing and great after that. If there's a Christian that's been through that life, I'd like to meet them. It's never been that way for me. We had struggles early on in our marriage. We've gone through financial struggles. I've gone through physical struggles now. The one thing that God has taught me through all these different struggles, I've met people in my life now that say, hey, I'm going through this. And I'm like, you know what? I've been there. Can I pray with you? Can I help you through this? When I came home from the hospital, they had me on so many pain medication, it was ridiculous. At one point in time, I was taking so many Oxycontin and hydrocodone at the hospital, and they had me on a morphine pump too. I mean, I was drugged out like crazy just to keep the pain down. When they sent me home with bottles of this stuff. I had a pain management doctor I had to go to every week. After about 2 or 3 weeks, I told my wife, I said, I hate this. I hate the way it made me feel. And I said, we just left the pain management doctor and I had all these bottles and I was like, I'm not taking another pill. I'm just gonna figure out a way to deal with this on my own. That was a mistake. I did not know what I was doing. I had the DTs, I had withdrawal pains, I had the sweats. I went through it all. The difference for me and what someone who's addicted is, I didn't want it here. My body needed it, so my body was addicted to it. But now even I've been able to go up to people who are drug addicts that have gone through some of this stuff, and I say, I can help you with part of it. I can't understand the mental side, but I can understand the physical side of what you're going through. God will use what you've gone through to help other people in life too.